So mask restrictions are starting to lift, and if you don't know how to handle that, you're in for a world of panic from your staff and from your guests, and we're going to talk about that all on today's podcast.
Salon owners are some of the most amazing people on planet Earth. The only problem is sometimes their hearts are so big and they give so much of themselves to their staff and guests that it creates unintended consequences. Our goal is to change the industry by elevating the way the rest of the world sees salons, spas, and barbershops and give it the credibility that it truly deserves. This is the Salon Owner Evo-Revo Show. Today's podcast is brought to you by Salon Scale, allowing you to charge by what you know, not by what you feel.
So welcome to today's show. I am Jason Everett, and with me today is Doug Campbell. What is going on, Doug? How the heck are you, brother?
I'm doing well. Good to be here.
Dude, well, look, for both of us, I'm in California, Doug's in Florida. We have some very different restrictions between how, our states have been handling mask mandates and what's going on. I'd love to find out, no matter what city you're in around the world or around the country, and I'm talking US and Canada, I'd love to know what are the current mask mandates as of today for you in your salon? Because, Doug, we deal with salons all over North America, right? And we have salons all the way across the country in almost every single state. And then we have salons across Canada. In the US, now the vaccinations are becoming much more prevalent. You were saying you've been seeing vaccination stations basically anywhere. I think I saw one outside of a McDonald's the other day. You can just roll on by, get a Big Mac and a shot, and you're good to go. Something like that. But the idea in the US is vaccinations are more abundant. So through that and through a lot of different things, they're starting to release restrictions. In fact, in California, the governor has said for a lot of situations that by June 15th, most mask mandates for outdoor experience are going to be lifted, and they're starting to lift them even more indoors. And in Florida, obviously a very different story. But in Canada, because I don't want to leave our Canadians out. You Canadians get upset if I leave you out. I don't mean to forget you. I would never forget our Canadian brothers and sisters up north. Is that you guys are having other, extra rounds of lockdowns. You guys are getting locked back down again. We have a bunch of salons that are in our system that just said, well, I'm just along for the ride. I know what to do. I've got my mental health plan set up for my staff. I've got our, Zoom meetings set up. You've got all these restrictions. And so as we're talking about these things lifting in the US, and you're not in the US going, how the hell can you guys even be talking about that? Just think this is what you're going to be dealing with in the not too distant future. Okay, is that as vaccines become more accessible, more available, and all these other things, you're going to start getting some of those same things happen in your area. So, Doug, can we talk about this today? Can we talk about mask bans starting to lift, and how the hell do we handle it inside the salon?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is you just got to think it through, and think it through without the panic or emotions involved in it. Just think through what. Sure. Because in every place, no matter where you are, you're going to have people that have feelings one way or the other of I'm never going to get vaccinated. Everyone should be vaccinated. I'm always going to wear a mask. I never wanted to wear a mask. You just got to take all that stuff into consideration. And because if you're in business, you're going to deal with all these people. So you need to figure out how you're going to, and also if you size business, you're going to have multiple different types of people working for you. And I think you just got to figure out how do you navigate that in a way that's good for the business and good for the people that work there and good for your clients. But you've got to shift. Goodness, everybody knows last year you had to make a pretty big shift in the way you did things.
And it was sudden and it was instantaneous. Yeah. And I see salons freaking out, right? They're like, well, the governor of our state didn't give us any notice. They just told us that we don't have to do this. And so they started panicking and they're freaking out. Mm-hmm. So by the way, guys, do me a favor, type in the chat, what are the mask requirements in your state? Or if you have no idea, say, I don't know, because I think it's a really important subject, okay? So here's the thing I want to make sure that we start this discussion with. You will never make all of your staff and all of your guests happy. Can I just release you from that curse for just a second? Is that I think so many salon owners, and Doug, I love our people to death, but man, oh man, is that they are so worried that one person will not like them that they make really poor decisions sometimes, right?
And I think that's the transparency thing too. To have the conversations, let people know what you're thinking. Because most of the time, if they don't 100% agree with it, as long as they know that you thought it out and you considered things along the way, then they're okay with it. It's whenever they feel like that, when people like it's the unknown. To your point, all of a sudden these things are just changing, and some people legitimately don't know. So I'm not real sure what is going on here now. I don't know if we're still required, somewhat required, kind of required, not required at all. And that's because some of the discussion along the way didn't happen. We went from, a pretty drastic change in the last month of, where we are now as opposed to what people were saying where we were going to be. I think you just got to take that temperature and find out. But to your point, no one's ever going to be completely happy. They need to trust your integrity and the way that you make the decision. As long as that's okay, I think people can disagree with you if you have integrity in the way that you're conducting it.
And I think well said, Doug, is you got to explain, you got to talk about what your decision was and why you made the decision that you made, right? So I think this is a really important thing. We've seen salons in our academy that said, hey, due to how we would like to operate to continue to protect your safety, we have decided as a salon that we will continue to wear masks for the indefinite future and just for your safety. And then guests are encouraged to wear masks, but not required to wear masks based upon our city mandates. And I've seen that sent out through emails. I've seen it posted on their social media, and I've seen it, posted in store or in salon when they're there. That's a way to handle the situation. I've seen other salons that have sent out messages and they've said, due to the comfort level of our guests and staff, that we have some staff that wish to still remain to wear masks. And we have some staff that will be choosing to not wear masks any longer, and masks have now become optional inside our salon. Thank you for your patience and understanding. And Doug, I think that thank you for your patience and understanding is like, look, we're learning this too at the same time that you are learning it, right? Mm-hmm. So I think if you just say, we appreciate your patience while we work through the change of rules, is very different than just saying, we're still gonna wear masks, or screw it, we're not wearing masks anymore, with zero, hey, understand we're all going through something that we've all never been through before, which I think requires a little bit of grace.
Yeah, because wearing a mask for 8 to 12 hours a day is not the healthiest thing for you either. So you got to weigh the two things and to look at. So in our situation, when we did away with the mandatory requirements for masks for employees and guests. And by the way, as long as we were making our employees wear them, we made our guests wear them, because it was not a optional thing. So if that's the policy, that's the policy on that. So now we've switched to where we do not require them. They're optional. If staff wants to wear them, they can wear them. If a guest wants to wear them, they can wear them. And if the guest requests that the stylist wear one while working on them, that is fine too.
Nice. Again, that's a big distinction, right? Is giving the guest the power and the ability to say, that would be to my comfort level if the guest. Now, I've seen people ask this question, Doug, can I request that everybody inside the salon wears a mask because I'd be uncomfortable coming into a salon that doesn't have a mask?
Then if you're uncomfortable, you'd have to find somewhere else, because we're not going to do that, because at this point, following the guidance that we've been given, that doesn't make sense. Most of the people are well beyond the distancing area, and so the person inside your bubble, if you want them to wear a mask, we're perfectly fine with that. We totally understand that. But it's about giving people choices and giving people the freedom, that your staff and your customers the freedom to pick. And so we don't want to make anybody uncomfortable, but we also don't want to force people into other things that make them uncomfortable or make them, it messes up the experience. I mean, your experience in the salon with a mask on is much different than it is with the experience with the mask off. So I think where we're getting, and I mean, you look at the numbers and stuff, and here, like I said, I mean, we were at a baseball game the other day, and there was a shot station set up there. You walk up and get a shot if you wanted one. I think it's just getting the point of it. That was actually the reason we made the decision back beginning of this month that we were going masks were optional, is because you literally, if you wanted a shot any day of the week, you could go and get a shot. So if you wanted to be vaccinated, it was available to you. So at that point, say, hey, we've got to make a shift here, because at your point, masks in and of themselves, especially all different type masks, become a health hazard. I mean, to do them correctly, you're supposed to be throwing them away or washing them every day and doing all that, and most people aren't. And it's just not. there's just health issues aligned to that, and every expert's always said that. But in the past year, that health risk was way outweighed by the risk of the virus. So, but that's starting to shift.
Right.
Like I said, as
Different
things move,
restrictions.
in business in general, as things move, as your climate shifts, the ones that win are the ones that are able to look at it and come to a good decision, a good consensus, and then communicate that properly to their staff and to their clients. That's because it's always going to change.
Yeah, Corey asked a great question. And see, this is exactly why I wanted to hit this topic. So let's bring up Corey's question. It says, question for you guys. If a client asks if your staff are vaccinated, are you telling them? My position is that it's not our place to reveal that to a client. It's a privacy issue. Great question. And I understand. Can I just say this? I understand why a client would ask that. I also understand the privacy side of it. And so I just want to clarify for all of you guys, this is where it starts to get dicey, is when people are going, I don't know what I should say. Should I tell them that I have staff that have chose not to be vaccinated? Doug, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to be careful about that. I mean, we say if they ask us, like, some are, some aren't. And it changes every day. So if you ask me, we don't require it. We don't record it. We don't do any of that stuff. That's a personal decision. It's just like we don't ask our guests, are you vaccinated or not vaccinated? I think that's their personal business. And that's the thing. It's like, let's give each other the space to. And if you don't like my policy as a customer, then you got choices to go other places. And I don't have to hold on to every client. I don't have to hold, but I'm not going to have, because this is a slippery slope. If you open up the door,
this is super dangerous.
Right. If you open up the door and let your client start dictating how you're going to run your business, and it's like, then you lose all authority whenever another client comes in and says, well, I think it should be this way. Why isn't it this way? So at some point you got to tell, you've got to be able to have,
how we choose to run the business.
You've got to have a clear policy that everybody understands, and this is how we're operating. This is why. If you're not happy, I totally get it. If that's beyond your comfort level, then you don't have to come here. And it's
I would also just throw this out here, just in statement for you, Corey, is just say, we have some that are and some that aren't, and it is not a requirement of employment for them to be vaccinated, just like it's not a requirement for you to be vaccinated to be a guest inside of our salon. If that makes you uncomfortable, we completely understand and would love to be able to support you in the future. I think one of the things that most people get stuck with is they just don't know how to respond to this situation. And since they don't know how to respond, it just gets them to a pause. And by the way, Corey, this is for Corey and this is for everybody else, is make sure that your front desk is trained on how to respond to this stuff, because they're going to get questions like this from time to time, and they're not going to know how to respond. And they're going to go, well, I don't really know. And it freaked me out. And I wasn't really sure. So there's a thing that I want to talk about. It talks about safety, and it talks about feeling special. Doug and I talked about this right at the beginning of the pandemic, and I think it's one of the most important subjects we can take on and discuss. So when we come back, we're going to talk about vaccinations on safety and feeling special, and how do you make sure those two things can still keep guests coming through the door of your salon. We have to take a quick break. We'll be right back after this short commercial.
Hey, HPSA listeners, let me ask you this. Are you tired of not knowing what your hair color is costing you on every appointment and watching it chew up your profit? Well, with Salon Scale, we take the guesswork out for you. Using a mobile app paired with a Bluetooth scale, Salon Scale will tell you exactly what your color is costing you on every bowl mix down to the gram. As you mix, Salon Scale will also digitally store your formulas and track how much product is being used in real time, so you can manage your inventory, cover your expenses, and generate more profit in your salon. Use promo code HPSA10 to get 10% off an annual subscription. Salon Scale, the new standard for mixing color.
So this becomes a challenge over and over again, is being concerned with people's safety, but making them feel special, right? As a salon, obviously safety is at the forefront of any guest appointment that you think of, especially in the last year that we just had. Got to consider their safety. However, you also have to say, how do I make other guests feel special when they come through the door, right? Because there needs to be that balance of feeling, Doug, you were mentioning, like, a guest experience with a mask on is completely different than a guest experience without a mask on. So how do we make them feel special? How do we make them feel safe? The vaccinations are creating a lot of safety for people, but then it's also creating this like byproduct of people going, well, wait a second, is everybody vaccinated, because that's what would make me feel safe, not the mask, but that everybody's vaccinated, right? So here's the thing, and I love that, Corey, you posted the second part of this question here. Can you post up the second piece for me, producer Bob? Is the second part of the question. She said, exactly. She said, I agree. We haven't had it yet, but I feel it's coming. Perfect, Corey. This is perfect, because you are already planning for it, which is smart. But if you're panicking before it happens, that can be extra. Does that make sense? And Doug, why is this a problem? Because I think so many people get paralyzed imagining a future that may not even happen, or like, but what if this happens? But what if this happens? Why is that what if a problem for salon owners so many times?
And it's one thing I like to call mental real estate. If you get caught up on those loops of worrying about what could happen and this, that, and the other, then you're not focusing on running your business and paying attention to the people that are actually there and love you, and your staff that's actually there and loves you. So you don't get caught up in that, because then you're liable to feed the fire. You're liable to start having those conversations with other people in your salon, staff members. Now you get them. Now you set a loop off with them. So it's like, there's no reason to come up with a good plan. Think it through, and then that's it. That's why we said you got to have a good policy that is well thought out, that everybody knows and understands. That's it. You go a long ways with people that may disagree with you if they feel like that your policy is well thought out and is considerate, and people know you can't make everybody happy. But then you're done. It's like, this is what we do. People come in. That's how we handle it. It's not okay. Well, what if this? Well, what if this? This is our policy. Here's what we do. So stop. Don't get caught up in that loop, because you're going to lose other opportunities. Other things that have nothing to do with this topic are going to fly right by you, because your mental real estate was being eaten up by this and not producing the future that you want.
So this is really important. I want to make sure you guys catch this. Doug said, and we advocate this all the time through the Academy, if you have a policy and if you have a plan, you will prevent panic. Right? If you have a policy, if you have a plan, you will prevent panic. So I think it's good to be concerned about it, put a plan in place, and then deal with it, but be wary of coming up with all of the possible scenarios that could go wrong. Sit down with your leadership team, discuss it, put a policy in place, and say, here's how we're going to handle the, are you wearing a mask question? Here's how we're going to handle the, is your whole staff vaccinated question? Here's how we're going to handle the, what if restrictions get worse? Will I still come in? Right? Like, how do you want to handle that? And I think there's two places you need to handle this first. Doug and I have advocated leadership teams inside your salon. Leadership teams inside your salon are a group of people that are maybe not a part of the management team, but you can sit down with them and talk to them and kind of get a general idea of what's going on in the salon. Now, if you only have a couple staff, it's a little harder to do, but if you've got a staff of 10, you got a staff of 20, you might want to advocate that 3 or 4 of them are part of the leadership team that can kind of communicate on behalf of the staff from time to time. So what I would recommend that you do is you start with talking to your leadership team, figure out what may happen, handle it, put a plan and put a policy in place. Then have a team meeting with your entire stylist. Say, hey guys, even if it's like last minute, you just found out that the restrictions changed, within 24 hours, get on the phone with your staff and say, hey guys, here's a policy that's been created. Here's going to be our stance on this. Here's how we're addressing these issues if they come up and when they come up. And then you got to decide, if you're going to talk to your staff about it, how do you then address your guests? And Doug, what is your thought on emailing your entire guest list, on putting a sign in the window, on texting everybody, on what do you say when they come in the salon? What are some of your thoughts on how that should be addressed with the client? Should it be addressed like if somebody asks, or should you face it head on and make sure you tell everybody before they even ask?
Well, I think you got to look at one. I think it's individualized. I'm not a big fan of cookie cutter. This is what everybody should do. I think you got to, you understand your business. You understand the people around you. You understand their sensitivity.
And the way in which you talk to your business, right?
Right. So you've got to figure out what is the best avenue of the way I've communicated things before. And plus, I don't want to send them out and spark artificial fires. So I mean, it's do that. If you do that, you trigger a bunch of people. Now you get all this influx. It's like, I knew all these people. It's like, if you had never sent that thing out, maybe you wouldn't have triggered all those people.
Completely.
So maybe that's the best way that you can. I'm not saying don't. I'm saying you've got to think through. How do I usually communicate with people? Would this seem weird, or is this normal for how I usually communicate with my clientele? And then
I'll give an example on that, Doug, real quick. I had a salon email me. This is a salon I went to like 10 years ago. I have not received an email communication from them in at least 7 years. And they sent me an email, and the first email I'd seen from them in 7 years was about this mask restriction.
Right. Right. There's
But
there's no
zero
reason to.
communication until
I mean,
they
and
need
you
it.
kind of, like every salon's had someone that's had a poor experience. I don't care how amazing you are, someone's
Right.
had a bad experience with you. And if they didn't get removed from your general list of email and you sent this thing out, then boom, now this person they can get on social media like, there's people I hate them anyway, and I've always hated them because just be aware. I mean, so who you're make sure you've got a good list if you're sending it out that way. Make sure that your list is purged and it's good. That's just good practice in general. And then, or is it signage at the door? And I would say, do it with humor and lightness and,
and on brand.
Right, because sometimes you can defuse things by adding a little humor, a little lightness to it at an appropriate level to kind of take the edge off of things. So think about the way that you're presenting it to people. It's not the end of the world one way or the other. It's an adjustment that we're making right now. And put the qualifiers. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your understanding. This is, these are tough, new waters to navigate. We've never done this before. So we appreciate you sticking with us.
Sure. Or even just putting up a sign that says, we're probably going to screw this up, but as of today, here's the rules, right? Like, I think people go a long way when you have the humility to say, I'm probably going to make a mistake, or we know we're not perfect, but we're trying to follow today's rule. You know what I mean? And even just saying something as simple as that, it just kind of releases that barrier of somebody walking into your salon and saying, how dare you, sir? How dare you, madame? Like, people are looking for excuses to be angry and be upset and, be frustrated and kind of take it out because their lives have been changed. They got all these new restrictions. And when their lives are changed and it upsets what they'd like to do, they're going to get more upset. So the more you can diffuse that and you just take the fuel out of it, the better it will be. I'm a big fan, Doug, of like what you said. Figure out what your appropriate communication needs to be. Maybe you have your receptionist or the text message state something for the appointments that are happening this week, because in a week or 2 weeks, maybe there's, you got 4 more weeks before some of these guests even come back with that new restriction. That the policy may be totally changed in 4 weeks. So I don't know that you need to notify everybody. What if you just notified the guests that are there? That would be another way to handle it, right?
Yeah, change your confirmation process to where if you're confirmed via text or confirmed via email, just add one sentence on there. Currently, this is boom. And just be aware that when it changes, you change that sentence. So then people coming into your business that is your client is coming in, is getting the proper information. As I say, you just think through of how you're communicating with your people. How are you getting these things done? Don't go it, because I do think people, to change everything is like, we gotta let everybody in the world know what it's like. That's not appropriate.
Well, we've talked about that for pricing changes. We've talked about that for, tiered pricing for stylists. We've talked about all those things. Starbucks doesn't email everybody and let you know that their prices have changed. They also don't email you every week and let you know that their mask policy has changed. When you go to Starbucks, there's a different sign on the door that says, here's today's restrictions. Like that's what you're dealing with. And, I've had a lot of contractors over at my house that are coming over, and they just said, hey, we just, like whether it's been the air conditioning people or a contractor, they said, hey, we're following COVID restrictions. We just want to make sure and verify that nobody in your house has been sick within the last 48 hours or whatever it was, or that has had any COVID symptoms. We say, no, it's all good. And then they're coming over. I think at some point, we're going to get to the point that will stay with us as a society for a while. We're just saying, like, there's an added element to how we are operating with people, but be aware that it's not like, hey, if you're vaccinated, we can hang out. If not, do your thing. I think you got to be aware of taking an extreme position. I think as a business, you got to realize that you have clients and customers that are in the vaccine camp and are ready to rock, and the anti-vaccine camp, and they are both going to be customers. And if for some reason you have a hard take on one of those stances, that's going to create some challenges if you jump down that path. But look, at the end of the day, it's like with any stance that you take, you are going to be polarizing. You are going to have some people that don't like you. And I started this podcast out this way. I want to end it this way too, is that you cannot please everyone. And the death of your business will be by trying to please everyone. You'll end up with no customers if you try and please the ones that are upset when they're upset. That is certain death to a salon. Anything else you want to say, Doug, as we wrap this podcast and get people a good framework and hopefully put a good head on? By the way, if you got a good head on now because of the podcast, type good head for obvious reasons, for good head of hair, and now your mindset is right. But what would you say, Doug? Anything else as we wrap today's podcast?
I say, like with anything, think it through. I love working things through with leadership team. That's amazing. I wouldn't run my salon without one. But think it through, make a decision, and move on. That's the biggest thing. Make a decision, stand on it, and move on. Don't get stuck on it. That's the biggest thing I can tell you.
Well said, guys. Don't be paralyzed by indecision. Move forward, rock and roll. Thanks for joining us on today's podcast. And as they create more restrictions, we will do our best to answer restrictions or restriction lifts. We will do our best to answer those questions to the best of our ability. And guess what? Doug and Jason will probably screw it up too. We'll be back to screw up on another podcast. No, I'm just kidding. I hope today was helpful. But we'll figure it out, right? We will figure out how to adjust and adapt just like you should in your salon. Until then, guys, have a great week. Thanks for watching today's show.
Later, guys.
Thanks for listening to the Evo-Revo podcast.
Today's podcast was brought to you by Salon Scale, allowing you to charge by what you know, not by what you feel.
Please subscribe, leave us a review, and you can always get more information, including show notes and the video episodes at evorevopodcast.com.